Hello, and welcome to another episode of Inside the World of Mack's Headroom. Um, today I want to discuss uh, Russ McKamey's Manor, or maybe even the YouTube McKamey Manor narrative, because it's plastered. McKamey Manor is plastered all over YouTube. And it's been epitomized, I think, in about a 7-part live stream with Ron Swanson on surviving life, who I like very much. I've also watched a whole bunch of his stuff, and I have come to the conclusion that McKamey Manor is actually just a very extreme form of stage hypnotism. And I think I have enough experience with hypnosis uh, to be able to make these claims. I'm not just saying, oh, he's hypnotizing everybody, but I want to try to explain to you, why I actually think this is an example of stage hypnotism. Uh, and the reason I say that I have a pretty substantial background in this is that when I was earlier in my career, I had the pleasure of spending a summer studying with Erica Fromm, PhD, who's now deceased, but she was like the grand queen of hypnosis, a very conservative, old school type of hypnosis. And she was from the University of Chicago, and she also was the editor of the Journal for Experimental and Clinical Hypnosis, which was like the big journal on hypnosis. All these subjects have big journals, and this was like the big journal that she was the editor for years. So I was very fortunate to learn a lot about hypnosis. And then I unfortunately hypnotized every one of my clients afterwards because I wanted to play with my new toy. But nonetheless, I've had a lot of experience with it. And I know what it is, I know what it isn't, and I want to try to show you how actually the McKamey Manor haunt is really a form of very extreme hypnosis, stage hypnosis. Now, let me just review for a second what stage hypnosis is. You probably know, but stage hypnosis is like a form of entertainment where a guy, gets up on the stage. He says he's a hypnotist. He hypnotizes a bunch of people, and then they bark like a dog and do stupid things and stuff like that for the audience's entertainment. And I actually was once a participant in a stage hypnosis thing. Actually, on one of my first dates. And I think that's important to highlight because I want to start now and trying to explain how, like, stage hypnosis and McKamey Manor is very, very similar. First of all, when the guy comes on stage and wants to, get volunteers, what he does, notice I said volunteers. He says, who would like to participate in the experience of being hypnotized? And of course, then certain people raise their hand and certain people don't. Well, you see, that's the first part of the induction because there's a self-selection process. You see, the people who raise their hand are probably more inclined to want to experience hypnosis than the ones that don't. Now, maybe there's a couple of assholes in the crowd that say, "Oh, I'm going to mess with this guy. That's how I'm going to get, my rocks off, in front of all these people." But see, there's even ways to deal with that because if you notice, there's little covert tests you can give along the way to see who's most suggestible and who's not. And if you catch somebody doing that kind of shit, there's very sleight of hand ways to keep that person sort of to the side and focus more on the people who are more suggestible. So it really kind of doesn't matter because I think the statistics are around 80% of the people who volunteer to participate in a stage hypnosis thing are going to be the ones that volunteer because they want to experience what hypnosis is anyway. You see? So he's got some prime pickings right at the very beginning. Now, jump to, McKamey Manor. See, what Russ does is he gets people to volunteer. And in the process of, and there's a long waiting list and stuff. We'll see the people that are, and this is no knock on the folks that have been through it, please. I'm not trying to ridicule you guys in any way, because look, I was stage hypnotized and I barked like a dog in front of my first date. Okay, so I mean, I'm not trying to, you know, say that you're gullible or this or that, or that you didn't experience the fear that you did, because see, when you're under hypnosis, you can be made to experience all kinds of things, okay, that may not even be stimulated by the external environment as strongly as you may react to them, because you may be told to react extremely. I mean, I'm just making an example, okay? So first of all, Russ, you know, gets you to volunteer. Now, many of the people who volunteer have probably been through other haunts, and so they enjoy the experience of being frightened and scared. And they go into it knowing that they're probably gonna vomit and do all this stuff. So again, there's a self-selection process. You know, he's not, people, I don't think too many people that are applying for this thing aren't people who are, you know, testing their mettle. You know, I don't believe that. I think they're into this being frightened shit, and they're just going to take it to the furthest level that they can with the McKamey Manor thing. So right up the bat, you've got a very vulnerable population to do and act the way you want them to, regardless of what the stimuli is that you're bringing on them during the haunt. And I'll try to explain some of that a little bit later, because there's a lot of stage antics that take place also. But to a hypnotized person, it feels very real. Whew. Okay, so we got self-selection. The next thing is the notion of repetition. Repetition is like a technique, a aspect of pragmatics that's used in all hypnotic induction. And whether that hypnotic induction be spontaneous, like it just happens on its own, like what's called highway hypnosis, where you stop seeing a line down, you know, the center of a lane, because it's the driving you're doing is so repetitious that you begin to focus internally and you start to fade your general reality orientation out of the picture. And see, that's another qualification for being hypnotized in the first place, is that what happens is you stop focusing on what's outside of you and you start focusing on what's inside, and that's called the fading of the general reality orientation. Okay, so repetition is something that will get you, because of the process of doing it, will get you to enter into this theta brainwave state. Okay, and you know, you can see that really in a lot of chanting rituals and stuff. You know, well, by the time you repeated that so many fucking times, you're not very aware of what's going on around you. But see, the neat thing, not neat, but the strange thing about people who do a lot of chanting is that, see, once you've lowered your brainwave frequency and you're actually more suggestible by chanting for so long, what happens next? Some guy gets up and gives you a sermon, and then you're very suggestible to taking in what he has to say, you see. So repetition is a mechanism by which brainwaves are actually lowered. You know, the contract itself that, you know, he talks about, this 40-page contract. See, that again is repetition. He goes on and on and on and on. And it's very hard, because he's saying, pay attention. Are you sure? Sign off here. Do this. That he's getting you to, I mean, basically, it's probably a repetition of the same sentences said differently, I'll bet, if I ever saw one, you know. Plus, while you're repeating and repeating and repeating, and your brainwaves are lowering back down to a theta level, you're also starting to internalize what he's warning you might happen. You might piss in your pants, you might vomit, you might be, so now you're already, you're a person who kind of is into that sort of challenge. And now you're being told through this monotonous contract that, you know, what you might experience, but you're repeating and repeating and repeating. And so by doing that, you're actually starting to accept the suggestion that that's probably what's going to happen. And so I think the contract is really another form of starting to induce a trance very gradually and by sleight of mind. Okay. The next thing I want to cover It's what's called, this is more of a psychological technique, but it's what's called the use of paradoxical intention. Now, a lot of people see that as synonymous with reverse psychology. And in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't when it's done well. But see, the way Russ does it, it's straight out reverse psychology. And that is that he tells you he doesn't think it's a good idea for you to do this. And what he does is, by telling you not to do it, it encourages you to want to do it more. I mean, that's how reverse, if you, all you people who make fun about reverse psychology, it happens every day on McKamey Manor. Usually, this isn't for you. I don't know if I should take the risk of taking you on. You know, this could happen, that could happen. You know, so he begins to also induct you more into cooperating by challenging you that you're not capable of doing it. You follow? Okay, now let's get down to what I think is the real big tamale, and that is the use of confusion. Now, confusion, I'm going to tell you, is a straight out hypnotic manipulation, and I'm going to tell you exactly why, because I think this is very important. A lot of you say, oh, well, you know, so I'm confused, that doesn't mean I get hypnotized. But let me explain to you how confusion and hypnosis have a very strong intersection. There's a technique in very formal traditional hypnosis that's called fractionation. Okay, if you want to Google it, I'll say it again. It's fractionation. Okay, and what it is it's a hypnotic deepening technique. What you do when you fractionate somebody is you want the trance to go deeper, just so that they think it's going deeper, so that they're going to cooperate with you even more. Okay, and when you fractionate somebody, what you do is you get them in a light trance state, and you want to deepen the trance state. So you stand behind them, you put your hands on each one of their shoulders, and then you say, when I push on this shoulder, the trance is going to get deeper, and when I push on this shoulder, the trance is going to get heavier. Now, I'm saying it very rote. I mean, it's done in a very kind of mysterious way, but nonetheless, that's the idea. You just say to the person, you'll start to notice that when I push on your right shoulder, you know, your trance is going to deepen, and when I press on your left shoulder, it's going to lighten. Okay, so then what they do is go like this: lighter, deeper, lighter, deeper, lighter, deeper. And you hear how my voice is starting to change every time I start to move toward deeper? Okay, then what happens is I'll do this: lighter, deeper, deeper, lighter, lighter, deeper, deeper, lighter, lighter, deeper, deeper, lighter, lighter, deeper, lighter. I mean, I'm babbling. But I mean, what happens is what you'll start to see is as they start to do this, the person will start kind of going like this a little bit, because what happens is in the beginning, every time when you go lighter, you'll notice the person will start to kind of sit up in their chair a little bit. And when you push on the deeper side, they'll start to kind of go down like this a little bit. So it tells you that they're responding to that suggestion. So now you go deeper, lighter, and you watch them going back and forth. Well, what happens is as you start to vary and make it very sporadic, it gets very confusing. Okay? It gets very, very confusing, because you're going up and down, and you can feel your consciousness kind of up and down, that's only because the hypnotist is suggesting it's happening. Your trance really isn't lowering, and by then you're already responding to suggestion. So the idea is, after he's gone, lighter, deeper, lighter, deeper, lighter, deeper, lighter, deeper, deeper, lighter, lighter, deeper, like that. And I'm being a little sarcastic. Then he goes like this: lighter, deeper, lighter, deeper, lighter, deeper, deeper, deeper. And the person kind of goes like this. Okay? Now, why is that? That's because while he's raising and lowering your trance so sporadically, it creates anxiety. This is very uncomfortable. You want to alleviate yourself of that anxiety, you see. And so what he does, when you're anxious and uncomfortable, the first thing you're going to do is kind of grab on to the thing that's the clearest of anything else, right? Adolf Hitler, believe it or not, was famous for this. He would babble for 20, 30 minutes talking total bullshit nonsense. And then all of a sudden he would say, "Don't you see what I mean? If we killed all the Jews, it would be better." And then the audience would go, "Yeah!" Well, that was because they were like fractionated. They were confused. They didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but they knew that they thought that he had some good idea in mind, but they were confused as hell. And then all of a sudden he would pause for a second, just like pushing on the side deeper, And then he would say, kill all the Jews. And then people would grab onto that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, you know, the idea of confusion, you see, makes people very vulnerable to accepting the next thing you say that's clear. And if you examine the way in which this confusion happens in McKamey Manor, the whole thing's confusing. You're blindfolded. You know, you don't know really what's going on. You know, they're talking like really ridiculous talk. You let me down, I'll give you another chance. So you're up, but oh, maybe, maybe not. And then all of a sudden, you know, he'll say, okay, you know, I'm putting my money on you in Vegas, you know, and then the person will take the next step, see? And then that person, remember, is already kind of like predetermined to want to take the next step because he likes that sort of activity. Otherwise, he never would have volunteered and self-selected for it in the first place. Whew. Okay. So, wait, need to hit a monster here. So confusion is very, very powerful. And the whole McKamey Manor haunt is very confusing. So by adapting, I'm not saying he had the knowledge. I mean, I think by now it's just people have kind of, you know, figured out, you know, confusing people gets you to listen, gets them to listen to you better. But actually, that's where it comes from this concept called fractionation. So what I'm trying to say is that the people that are going through the haunt, I guess what I want to say is that I think what Russ McKamey is doing is a very extreme form of stage hypnosis. However, what he's doing is, first of all, he's prolonging it. Because on a stage hypnosis thing, the act only lasts about 45, 50 minutes. He's got people, you know, they could be locked up forever. But, you know, they may be so hypnotized by the end of the contract and having internalized the expectations of what might happen, and coupled by the fact that they're the kind of person who likes to be scared in the first place, that they may start going having anxiety attacks before they even walk into the first zone, you know? I'm going to take a break for a second and just reorganize my thinking. Okay, I'm back. You know, I just want to make one other little point, and that is that also what goes on during a McKamey Manor haunt is a couple of things. One is brings into question the notion of role play. You know, role play everybody thinks is like pretend. Well, it's really not. It just starts out pretend and then it becomes real. Well, when you couple that with hypnosis, which makes it real faster, what you have is a role play situation that becomes real, because all successful role plays become real. I remember one time being in a role play, and it was over like several weeks in a special training group I was in. We were all taking on roles of a member of an imaginary family, and I was a therapist that was handling this imaginary problem that was kind of evolving. We had a little bit to begin with, and then it would evolve. Well, by the end of like the second week, people were yelling at each other, and all these issues were coming up. Why? Because role play becomes real if role playing is successful. I would go back also to the notion of even SMBD. You know, they call that role playing. Well, it's really not role playing. It may be that you're dressing up like, you know, different than you go to work. But after a while, it becomes more and more and more and more real. And I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. I'm just saying it becomes more and more and more and more real, like as if you're actually experiencing it instead of pretending it. And I think that's what goes on in Russ's show as well. One other thing I want to just address too is that there is a lot of stunt stuff that goes on. I caught it last night. I saw a guy slap a guy, and I could have sworn I didn't see the head recoil very much. So I took my TV and I put it like on Zoom, and I noticed that what he was doing was this old trick, you know, like that, you know, you like holding it by the back of the head, you know, but then moving it to the front and slapping your own hands. You motherfucker, you know, and nobody knows that you didn't slap him. But the guy's hypnotized, and if there's just a little bit of you know, jolt, let's say, behind that pretend slap, well, he thinks he was really slapped, and he's freaking. You follow what I mean? I caught a couple of other little tricks, like You know, a lot of people talk about this waterboarding thing. Yeah, I think Russ takes it a bit far when he starts pushing people in bathtubs. Um, but that I think speaks to some of the misuse of Russ's latent or not so latent sadism. And but he does do some things that are, along with being sadistic, are still not the real thing. And one has to do with the question of waterboarding. I have a friend who, in a prior life, was a covert operative for the Department of Defense, and he specialized in interrogation. So, and he's like one of my BBFs. I'm telling you, he's a great guy. But you know, he's worked with scopolamine, and he's worked, you know, with all kinds of different, you know, ways to get people to behave. But you know, one thing he told me about waterboarding is that the whole concept of successfully waterboarding somebody is to put a cloth across their face and nose and filling it with just enough water so that when they inhale, they can still breathe, but they have to take down the water at the same time, which creates a choking response. So it feels like they're drowning, but you're not killing them. Well, I caught old Rusty Boy doing something like this. He had a guy in a bathtub, and he had you know, like a hat pulled completely over his face, right? And then he was like, you know, like kind of tormenting him and saying, you know, oh, you can't continue, you can't continue, I need to pull you out. And then he was reaching into the bathtub and very gently flashing water over his mouth. Well, to the normal person, they would say, oh my God, he's waterboarding him. But see, in reality, he wasn't waterboarding him because he wasn't putting enough liquid into this hat so that a combination of air and water was going into the lungs, creating a choking response. But does the guy choke? Of course he does, because he's in a hypnotic state. He's a person who's prepared for this kind of stuff. And, you know, he starts to choke. But I watched Russ. There was not enough water put over that guy's mouth and nose to get him to start, you know, getting that combination of water and air together that creates a real choke response. So, you know, I think there's just a number of things that go on with McKamey Manor that make it really quite a sham. And like I said, I do see it as a form of stage hypnosis that's mixed with some bastardization of psychological manipulation, which should only be used by a really trained professional. You know, that's why I react to the word reverse psychology. If you really knew how you use reverse psychology, it has nothing to do with telling someone to do something that you don't want them to do. It's so much more complex. But it will work when someone's already inducted into hypnosis. You follow? But I do think that there's a lot of stage hypnosis involved. I think he does a lot of like sleight of hand or sleight of mind kinds of things. You know, another thing I observed too is the way he touches people. See, as soon as you touch somebody, you violated them. Well, if they're ready to be violated anyway, they're going to react to it real intensely. But they don't really do anything so horrible. I saw one guy take his finger and pull a nice cheek out, or, you know. And also, one last thing, you know, this whole thing about bugs and insects and stuff. See, that has to do with the confusion technique. Because by the time they put the bugs on the person's face or make him start swallowing shit so he vomits, right? They have already confused the shit out of the person. They've repeated the same thing. Say this, say that, say this, say that. So he is in such a deep state of trance that when the guy suggests that, you know, we'll see what you're really made of, and they start putting bugs on him, the person's going to allow the bugs to be on him, because he knows that that's what the operator, or in this case, Russ McKamey, expects. Because most people would shake their head like crazy and say, what the fuck, I'm getting out of here. And that's the biggest thing you really have to ask yourself is, why is it that nobody gets up and starts punching? You know, that in itself, I think, answers a lot of the malarkey contained with McKamey. And I probably have some other things to say, but I'm going to stop and hope that I made my point. Oh, one last thing. I do believe there's a whole bunch of stuff about Russ McKamey and his mental health. I think he's mostly sadistic. That's all. So he has created this, kind of like so-called legit haunt thing, and employed these techniques to get people to do all kinds of crazy stuff, and then kind of overreact to it. I think as well. Like that, I saw a guy time out like in like 5 minutes, and all it was just psychological hypnosis and tormentation. But I think he's a sadist, and so I don't want to like give him any kudos. He's a jerk. Um, but please understand that there's a method to his madness. And whether he even recognizes the method to his madness or not, there is. So that's what I got to say about old Russ McKamey and McKamey's Manor. And again, this has been another episode of Inside the World of Max Headroom. Thank you very much.